Hello and welcome. That is a god-awful Connor Orr impression. The voice you're hearing is Albert Breer's. That's me. Connor Orr is on assignment. We are back, though, with our Week 12 edition of the MMQB podcast. I've got my colleague Matt Verderame in to break down everything that happened in Week 12. And Matt, it was a little bit of a different week in that we had, I think, for the first time in a little while, a really good end to the 1 o'clock window. The 4 o'clock window, not great. But then we had a borderline historic performance in the nightcap. And not that was the best game you'll ever watch, but that's where we're going to start. Because I think, Matt, have to go ahead and change the narrative on the Eagles back to maybe what we thought of them at the beginning of last year and when they started last year, the way they did coming off of the Super Bowl. And, it's so interesting to me because I remember thinking coming into the year, how many coaches in Nick Sirianni's spot would be on the hot seat going into 2024. And if you look at his record, he took over a 4-win team. Now, I know the Eagles have great history, so it's not like a dumpster fire situation, but He took over a 4-win team. And in year one, they stumble out of the gate, they rally, they make the playoffs, they win a playoff game. In year two, they make it all the way to the Super Bowl and really go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs. They controlled that game in the early going. Mahomes was Mahomes, and they didn't wind up winning it, but they looked set up there to really go on a 2 or 3 year run where they're consistently contending. Then they start that way last year, and they crumble down the stretch, and they've got the coordinator issue, and there was questions about whether or not Sirianni was going to survive it. Yet, they still made the playoffs.
Right.
So, I don't know. It was always kind of funny to me coming into the year that Nick Sirianni gets a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, a new defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio, and we're going to get to Saquon Barkley, I promise. but that you have a guy who gets his staff turned upside down, who it's common knowledge that he's on the hot seat coming into the year, and yet here's a first-time head coach who inherited a 4-win team, who's made the playoffs 3 times and made a Super Bowl. So it's amazing how with that franchise and really in that division, how narratives shift back and forth so violently. But after last night, it looks like we're right back where we were about a year ago from right here, right now.
Yeah, look, I think there's a few things that are true about the Eagles. Considering what happened in totality on Sunday, they win, the Commanders lose a game that those fans will replay in their minds for months.
Yep.
That division appears over. I mean, yes, obviously, there's time and they play again, whatever, but Philadelphia's clearly in the driver's seat. And then, listen, I give Sirianni this. When he was flipping off fans against Cleveland, it kind of felt like a moment where that might be something that we look back on and go, yeah, that was when it was over. I'm pretty sure they haven't lost since. They haven't lost a game since then. I mean, they have been ripping off one after the next. They won 7 in a row. They started out a little slow. They were 2-2, and you kind of felt like, okay, it's just going to get right what has in a big way. I mean, they're not just winning; they're dominating in a lot of these games. The offense looks great. And look, I give a lot of credit to Vic Fangio, who's taken over this defense.
Yeah.
A lot of new pieces, a lot of moving pieces. And I think it's got to be said, Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell, they're one of the best corner tandems in the league now, and they're rookies.
Yeah.
So, Howie Roseman playing a big part. I think in the end, infrastructure wins out a lot in the NFL. Infrastructure is winning out in Philadelphia. They didn't have a knee-jerk reaction. They didn't panic. They fixed a lot of the problems. They brought in those new coordinators you mentioned, and they now are clearly, in my eyes, one of the top 4 teams in the league, along with Detroit, Buffalo, and Kansas City.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple things that are really impressive when you go back and you look at it. I mean, the first thing is I do think Nick riding it out, and it's so funny. You bring up the thing with him yelling at fans, and I think a lot of people's reaction was this guy's not really. Is this guy really a fit for Philly? Can this guy really take being in Philly? And it's almost like that proved that he is, because he doesn't care what they think. He doesn't care how people are going to react to him. He isn't going to be shaken by people taking the way he is or who he is the wrong way. He doesn't care. And I think being in a place like that, having that IDGAF, is that the right? I think those are the right letters of the acronym.
You hit it. You got it.
Sort of attitude, I think really works, right? So give Nick his credit. I think the infrastructure argument you make, like, they have so consistently built the same way in one key area, and that's in the lines of scrimmage
up front.
And like, I think if you look at like taking two foundational pieces for that franchise out of the equation this year, and Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox, and being so ready to replace them with Cam Jurgens on offense. You have Mekhi Becton as a reclamation project. Landon Dickerson's established at guard, so the interior offensive line is good. And then on defense with Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, it's a triumph of just, we got good players, but we're going to continue to pour resources into it because that's who we are. It's like what the Giants used to do in the D-line, right? Like where they would just, we don't care if we have, it doesn't matter if we have Michael Strahan and Justin Tuck. We're going to draft OCU Manure in the first round, you know? It's the same thing. It's like you just kind of, like, we're going to keep that our strength. So if someone retires or someone gets hurt, it's going to remain our strength. So it's developing Jordan Mailata when they struck out on, and now
Dillard.
his name is
on Andre Dillard.
On Andre Dillard, right? Thank you for saving me.
But it is true though. Like really, not to belabor the point, but I think so many teams in the NFL every year, and really for many years, a lot of them have an identity crisis. They don't know who they are. Mm-hmm. They pivot from one thing to the next thing. Look, the Jets are a perfect example of that right now. There's no identity. It's just, okay, we're going to try this, we're going to try this, we're going to try this. The best franchises, even in a down year, even when things don't work for whatever the reason, a talent gap, injuries, whatever, they know who they are. They go back to who they are. And they know at their core what they believe in, how they want to win. The Eagles might exemplify that better than any other team in the sport in the terms of they know exactly who they are and what they want to be every year. They relentlessly pursue that. And that has resulted this year in a team that's 9-2 and is going to fight Detroit tooth and nail to be the number one seed in the conference.
And that's where we can get to the job Howie's done. And obviously Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean look like home runs. They needed to get younger on defense. They've done that. They were old and slow on defense last year. That was the problem. And now, like, you see Fletcher Cox is gone. They've got two young defensive tackles in there with depth behind them. Darius Slay's gotten older. They've got Quinion Mitchell. They've got Cooper DeJean. Their safety position is younger. At linebacker, having, not only like hitting on Zach Bond in free agency, but now like Nakobe Dean's worked his way up through the system where he's a good player for them. But the big one, of course, that everyone's going to be talking about today is Saquon Barkley. And this to me is like, it's where a team has its principles, but doesn't stick to them to a fault, where for a while there, like the Eagles wouldn't invest anything in running backs.
Yeah.
And then like as things change over the last few years and evolve, what they started to realize is that running backs have been devalued to the point where they now are a value. A veteran running back is a value. And you see the Packers do this with Josh Jacobs too, where it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, we're going to go get Saquon Barkley, who's going to touch the ball 300 times for what Atlanta paid for Darnell Mooney. All right. Yeah. So like, just think about just wrap your head around that. You know what I mean? Like, so even if he is hurt and misses 3 or 4 games, like,
yeah, right. It's still worth it.
It's still fine. Like, even if you get like a little less than like the high end of what you're hoping for, it's still probably more valuable than a second or third receiver, right? Which is what you're paying, which is the cost you're paying for him. So there's that. And I mean, I don't think you can say enough about what he did last night. And not only that, like earlier in the year when they had the receiver injuries, this is where I think the MVP, where the MVP conversation becomes very real, is earlier in the year when they had the injuries with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, he was the guy who kept them afloat. And now he looks like the guy who's going to put them over the top.
Look, we have not had an MVP in the NFL that's a non-quarterback since 2012 when Adrian Peterson did it with the Vikings when he rushed
coming
for
off the
2,000
ACL,
yards.
if I remember
he was
right.
coming off. He was coming off the injury, ran for 2,000 yards. That was a year where they had like Christian Ponder, a quarterback, and somehow against like stacked boxes where he faced like 15 guys every play, he still ran for 2,000 yards. To me, if Barkley runs for 2,000 yards, he's MVP of the league. I don't know how you argue it. I mean, Lamar has amazing stats, but they're a 4-loss team already. They may not even win their division. We'll see what they do on Monday night. Josh Allen has a case, but Josh Allen has not had great statistical numbers this year. I mean, he's certainly been very good, but Barkley is the engine of that team in a way that no other running back is. And even as great as Derrick Henry's been, like Lamar is the engine of that team, and Henry's been awesome as a sidecar component. But Barkley is a singular talent this year in a way that nobody else is. I mean, I'm sitting there watching that game Sunday night. You know, the Eagles had pulled away, and the second time he took off on one of those long touchdown runs, I was like, how many yards does he have? And I started looking it up on my phone. I'm like, my God, he gets 300 yards in total offense.
It felt like a college game where like the guy just keeps breaking off long runs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like he was back at Penn State and he was playing like, Purdue, and he just kept going. And you're like, I mean, it's and watching, I've watched every snap of them, sure. I mean, you almost feel like it's inevitable of him. At some point, he's going to make a guy miss, get to the second level, and he's gone. Like, nobody's going to bring him down. And it's not just the running. I mean, the running's amazing. It's 1,392 yards, 6.2 yards per carry. But he's also a guy, he's caught 33 passes. I mean, he's also a weapon out of the backfield as a receiver. So best signing
to
in
me,
football.
Matt, that to me, I said this a few years ago. I really do feel this way. That to me is like the prototype of like the new age back who really is worth a big contract and probably worth more than he's making. It's the 230-pound back who can play in all three downs. I think it was Zeke Elliott, his prime in Dallas, Todd Gurley, early on in McVay's time in LA. It's the guy who is 230 pounds and is a weapon out of the backfield. That guy's a true like queen on the chessboard. And that's what Saquon is. Saquon's a queen on the chessboard. Saquon, you can play different looks out of different formations and different personnel groupings because of who he is as a player. And that adds to his ability as a 230-pound guy who can run between the tackles. So, it's just, it almost feels like he, I'm going to say this now. It almost feels like what the hell could he have been over the last 6 years if you weren't in New York?
Right. No, that was everybody's thought. I mean, how could it not be? I was sitting there thinking the same thing, Albert. I was like, man, could you imagine if the Giants were confident?
Did we just like miss an all-time great because
could he have been like challenging Emmitt Smith by now? I know, like we all like. I thought the same thing. I'm like, man, if the Giants are confident the last 6 years, like Barkley could be, pushing about 12,000 yards right now. There's no question,
he played for 3 different coaches, 2 different GMs. Like
the line was terrible forever. Yeah, I mean,
and it's like, oh, and by the way, no one's ever doing Hard Knocks off season again.
No, that might be what the Mara family shows Joe Shane this off season when the time comes.
I mean, between the Daniel Jones thing that like where he like, I think it had a real effect on his confidence, and then the Saquon stuff that just makes everyone look bad. It's I mean, look, to be fair to the Giants, I think the Giants were, maybe the victim of a little bait and switch there. I don't know that they knew that it was going to be what it was billed to them as when they first were presented with it. And I think they got put in a little bit of a tough spot, so I don't think it's those guys' fault. But, I mean, holy crap, you talk about a lot of things blowing up in their face.
I would argue that the Giants are a victim of the Giants. They have, and
we'll get to them, but yeah.
How do you let that guy walk out the door? And look, you know what, honestly, and
there's part of me that says okay because there's still part of me that says okay because when you're in the position they are in, building the way that you're trying to build, do you need a $13 million running back? And that I think that's the one thing, that's the one saving grace here is like, I think if you're them, in your head, it's like, are we going to be a contender fast enough that this guy's still going to have juice left? Like that's the argument,
what kills them.
But they could have done it earlier, which that to me is like that. Like, so I understand not doing it last offseason when he's going into year 7 with all of the injury history and everything. I get that, right? Why didn't you do it a couple of years ago?
Well, that's the thing. I remember that day. We were
because he wanted to stay.
But like, I remember that day when they went to the 11th hour and the 11th minute, and they signed Daniel Jones for 4 years and 160. And look, this isn't a hindsight thing. Everybody knew at the time, like, why? Why? I mean, people were talking about Daniel Jones if he had a career year. Yeah, his career year was 3,200 yards and 15 touchdowns. His career year was a good month for guy. Like it was a ridiculous contract.
And I mean, what are we talking about? 12 versus 13.
Jones, and pay Barkley. Like it made no sense. It never made any sense.
All right. So anyway, I think we're both on board with this. Like the Eagles are a very real Super Bowl contender.
What is Underdog? Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and 2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Just call your shot by picking higher or lower on 2 or more players' stats. Underdog is for everyone, so you can make a play with only $1 or go big and win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. Underdog is the best place to cash in on all your takes this football season. Which players are going to go off? Which players are going ice cold? Make your picks in just a few taps and turn your sports opinions into real money. Try End Zone Rush. This is a game you won't find anywhere else. You just pick whether or not a player will score a touchdown by swiping right for yes or left for no. It's as simple as that. Plus, your entry will be automatically boosted and you'll get a 51% profit boost when you play. Join over 5 million fans that are already playing on Underdog with their pick'em games. You could win some money by making entries with your favorite players. Underdog is the best place to play pick'em, so sign up now and deposit using promo code Sports Illustrated to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. I am not a gambler. I got some friends out there who they always come to me and they say, Connor, how do I do this? How do I bet this? What is a spread? What does all this stuff mean? This is what's interesting about Underdog. You don't have to know all that stuff. You don't have to be an old-fashioned mafioso-style bookie. You just have to know higher, lower, yes, no, score, no score. They're making it a little bit easier for you to get into the game. Download the app today and use the code Sports Illustrated to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's Sports Illustrated for $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Every player, every touchdown, just select higher or lower on Underdog. Must be 18 years of age or older, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska and Colorado for some games, 21 and older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8 Hope NY or text Hope NY at 467-369.
I don't think less of the Rams it's just they're sort of limited in certain ways. And, I think where they are right now, they've got a very promising future. Like there are a lot of young guys making plays for them. Puka, all the D linemen, Fisk and Verse and Byron Young and Kobe Turner. And I think the Rams are sort of still in this transition phase where, and I think I got in a little over my skis on them where I was like, oh, well, like last year's maybe the real launching point where maybe they're still a little bit in that transition phase where when they face a team like this one, they're just not there yet.
I think to your point, look, I think their back seven needs to get better. They're just not good enough yet in the back seven, but the front four is really underrated. And Verse and Fisk have been hits. I think offensively they can have a game against just about anybody. They could put up 30, and
Yeah.
they're scary because of Kupp and Nakua and Kyron Williams and everybody else, Stafford, of course. Here's the deal if you're the Rams. Like that loss, yeah, it hurts, whatever. You had an opportunity. I would argue the worst loss was a couple weeks ago against Miami where you're at home. You had every opportunity to
Yeah.
win that game. You couldn't do it. You're a game back in that division. The division's not good. Seattle's winning the division. You already beat Seattle. You have a game against the Cardinals still at home, looming. You play the Niners again. Who the hell knows what's going on with the Niners? They're so beat up that you don't even know where they're going to be here in a few weeks.
Mhm.
So if you're the Rams, everything's kind of right in front of you. I mean, you still have a very real path to being not only a playoff team, but a playoff team with a home game. So I think if you're the Rams, you'll look at it and go, you know what? The goal is to win that division. That's it. Whatever that takes. 9-8, 10-7. And they could still do that, and that offense is dangerous in any playoff game.
And we can use that as a launching point for our discussion about the Niners-Packers game, which I think is probably mostly going to focus on the Niners. The Packers are what they are. They're a really solid team that think if Jordan Love gets hot down the stretch, and I mean, there were chances for them to blow that game open that really lost opportunities that weren't on Love. Like there was a ball down the sideline to Christian Watson that was a dime.
Yep.
Like there were. I think Jordan Love played pretty well last night, and I think he's got the capability of really kind of putting his foot in the ground and going the way that he did at the end of last year. And that's a really good team. Jeff Hafley's made a difference on defense. The Niners to me look like the old prize fighter that just is hanging on the ropes and is swinging, but just does not, like he's sort of punched himself out. And they're proud, they're tough, they hang in, but I mean, like they very clearly miss Nick Bosa, and Bosa's very beat up right now. Not that anything he's dealing with the season ending, but both hips. I mean, he's feeling the mileage a little bit. Brock Purdy has the throwing shoulder injury, which, you hope it resolves itself and he'll be okay next week. But, I've learned in my time covering the league when it's a quarterback's throwing shoulder, like, there's really, just be careful about talking in absolutes. Like you said, they're just a game back. So I still think they have that gear and that capability to, if everything comes together. But right now, it doesn't look like they've got a ton in the tank.
You just wonder, I'm a big believer in when you've got an opportunity to grab that ring, like you got to do it. You have to make that count. And it's not easy. There's nothing against them. There's no shame in losing to Mahomes in a Super Bowl. They've fallen victim to that twice. But they went to the NFC title game or the Super Bowl, at least the NFC title game, 4 out of the last 5 years. And this is always the risk. It's like you get older. Every year you get older, guys get hurt, things happen. And this Niners team, if you look over the next 2 off seasons, almost every guy's a free agent. I mean, almost every meaningful player on that team, obviously Ayuk.
The cap charges are massive.
They're huge. I mean, you're at some point going to have to move off Debo, and you're going to have to move off Trent Williams eventually, and you have to move off Samuel, Kittle even at one point here or another. Like Purdy, are you going to pay him $60 million a year? I mean, you have to make that call. You have to make that decision. You're not going to get him on some discount. He's played too well. I would imagine they pay him, but you're going to have to pay him. Guys like Hufanga, are you going to pay him? Or how long can they keep Fred Warner as the highest paid linebacker for? I mean, they have been able to do this for so many years because they haven't had to pay the quarterback. They've been able to just build around this idea that we have the cheapest quarterback in the league. And I think for the Niners, is hope dead? No, because the division's not good. But to your point about the prize fighter, it does kind of feel like Joe Frazier and Foreman at this point. And Frazier's just hanging on after the 4th time he's been knocked down. And you're like, all right, well, do they have enough time? I mean, their schedule's not easy. They go to Buffalo
next week, yeah.
I mean,
that could be it.
That could be like the roundhouse shot.
Yeah.
That it's done by halftime. They've got Detroit later in the year. They've got the Rams again. They don't have the luxury of time anymore. They've got to go now. And you just wonder, can they? Is there any ability to do that?
Yeah, and it's like I think it leads to some big picture questions, you know. So is this the offseason you trade Debo because of his mileage and because you just paid Ayuk? You know, Kittle's getting up there in years. Can you afford to keep McCaffrey? You know, and what does Christian have left? I think what you're building around going forward is probably Purdy, Ayuk, Bosa. Like, I think that's probably the guys that you are definitely looking at, like, we're moving forward with these guys. Replacing Trent Williams is going to be no picnic whenever that happens. You know, so I just look at it like, do they just ride this till the wheels fall off, or is this a sign that they need to start, you know, taking the wheels off themselves after this year, you know, and going in and refurbishing the car? Again, they've got such good people in charge, and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, that you think, they sort of did this once before. You know, they did pay Jimmy Garoppolo at the top of the market at the time. Yep. They did wind up, you know, having to offload DeForest Buckner, and so they've been through this before. But it won't be easy, you know, and it's going to take hitting on a lot of draft picks. And you look at like what they did and how remarkable it was, like George Kittle and Fred Warner and all these guys they plucked out of the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds, you know. Deebo Samuel was a 2nd rounder, you know. Yeah. So like they've done such a good job of doing that. It's really hard to repeat that. You know what I mean? Like you remember, like ask Seattle. Like Seattle did that all those years ago with Earl Thomas, and Earl Thomas is a bad example because he's a 1st rounder, but you know, Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Bobby Wagner were all outside the 1st round. You know, it's really hard to repeat that after you've done it once.
It is. And I think, you know, for the Niners, look, I think they're going to have to be a little bit more of a traditional build now. They're going to have to pay Purdy. Mm-hmm. And you have to kind of build the way we see Buffalo build and Kansas City build. And you know, all these teams that have spent major money on these players who, you know, look, are seminal pieces of the team. You have to have a great quarterback to compete in the NFL. You have to. Otherwise, you're going to have a very, very tiny little window where maybe you get lucky and you hit on the right things and so on and so forth. But the bottom line for the Niners is they are going to, whether they come out of this or not, they're going to have to ask themselves some hard questions in February and in March of like, what do you do? Mm-hmm. How do you go forward? Because it's not just the expenses, it is age. None of these guys at this point are 24, 25 years old. I mean, that's just the reality. And, you know, we'll see. They have a game coming up in Buffalo that feels like it's kind of, do you make a Custer's last stand here? Or is this game 41-6? And it's like, yeah, okay, it's over. We're going to find out.
Yeah, and sometimes those things are amplified when they are on national television and standalone game, and that's what this one is too. It's on a Sunday night, so be interesting to see where that goes. Elsewhere in the NFC, and you know, I think, Matt, a lot of people have been waiting for the other shoe to drop on Sam Darnold, and I don't think it's happening. Like, I think Sam Darnold's just a good player now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying he's a great one. I'm not putting him in the top 5.
That's
but
good.
He's a very good quarterback, and I think he's like become another shining example. Put him right there with Geno Smith. You know, of a guy who had bad circumstances early in his career, got knocked on his ass, picked himself up. He and Geno also have something else in common.
Yeah,
you can look that up.
Yeah,
you can look that up.
It went hand in hand with them having bad circumstances.
Yeah. But I thought Sam was great in this game. You know, and I think Sam's showing the ability. You know, he had a couple of I'd say rough ones. You know, in the last month or so. But he's showing the ability now to kind of ride out a season and go through the ups and downs, which he hasn't had to go through in a while because he's been sitting or he's been benched or, you know, like all of these different things. I'm just impressed with the job Kevin O'Connell has done with him. You know, he put him on a good team, a good group around him. Vikings are down to like their 4th left tackle, whatever it is. They're able to ride that out. I think he's getting more out of TJ Hawkinson than we've seen, you know, in Hawkinson's career. He's forced to go away from Justin Jefferson in this one. Jordan Addison has a big game. I just think Sam's playing really, really well. And there was one thing pointed out to me that was really interesting. A couple weeks ago, he threw a bad pick that was intended for Jefferson. Well, the first play of the second half, they went back to that same play call, and you could actually see on the play call him taking the lesson of what happened, where the two guys, Jefferson and Addison, are running over routes, and so he threw to Jefferson inside. On the first one, it got picked off because the ball was thrown into traffic. Well, in this one, you see same play call, same concept. He rolls out and he puts it outside to Addison, and Addison goes for 63 yards. So it's just like one of those little subtle things where, a quarterback is getting better from the experiences he has over the course of a season.
What's incredible at Darnold, too, is I feel like he's been in the league forever. He's 27.
I know.
I mean, he's still...
Because he was 20 when he came in, yeah.
Yeah, right. He was one of the youngest quarterbacks ever come in. And look, I think, though, this speaks to, not taking anything away from Darnold, I think this speaks to how much coaching matters in the NFL.
Yep.
Like, more than it does in other sports. Kevin O'Connell is a great offensive schemer. He's an excellent coach. He builds relationships, and you see it in Darnold. And you mentioned Geno Smith. I'll give you another one, Baker Mayfield.
Yep.
Who gets out of Cleveland, where he had one really big year, and okay, maybe he's going to take off. Then he had the shoulder, he got hurt, and everything happens. It happens. He ends up in Tampa.
Wasn't really even his fault, though, because that was sort of a product of the Deshaun Watson thing,
Right. And so he leaves, and, by way of the Carolina Rams year, ends up in Tampa, and they give him a one-year deal, and he's with Dave Canales, and all of a sudden he revives his career. Now Baker Mayfield's playing great, playing like one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. So much of the NFL, especially at the quarterback position, where do you end up? Who is coaching you? I mean,
who are you throwing to?
Yeah, there's so many things, right? Like, Sam Darnold didn't have Justin Jefferson anywhere else, and Jordan Addison is an excellent number 2 receiver. And you mentioned Hawkinson, and you have a guy who knows how to utilize those pieces. And so to me, Darnold is playing better, and it's a confluence of all those other things. Like, I think to your point, like, waiting for the Vikings to just fall on their face is a mistake here, because O'Connell's running this offense, which is a talented offense. The defense is run by Flores, who last year they took huge steps after being atrocious under Ed Donatel. This year, they brought in Van Ginkel. They brought in Grenard. You can see how that's paid off. So, look, they're a game back of the Lions in the North.
Yeah.
Like, I think everybody just assumes, wild card team.
They have second best record in the NFC.
They're 8-2. They're right there. So, look, they have resurrected Darnold's career. Darnold seems to have found a home. What's going to be really interesting is next year when McCarthy comes back.
Yeah. And
that presents an interesting, do you tag and trade Darnold? Like, what do you?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
I think I this much. Like, I kind of had this thought during the game is like, Darnold may not be starting for Minnesota in 25. I think he's going to be starting somewhere.
Yes.
I think he's going to be starting somewhere. Just to put a button on this real quick, the Bears, despite the loss, Caleb Williams is starting to play pretty well.
Yeah,
and he made a hero throw that was like one of his USC throws where he rolled right. I know you know which one I'm talking about. I think it was Swift down the sideline.
It was Swift down the right sideline.
Swift down the sideline. That there are probably 5 people on the planet that can make that throw. And then the throw right down Main Street in at the end of regulation to set up the game-winning the game-tying field goal to force overtime. It looks like Thomas Brown's doing a good job finding ways to get the ball out of his hands quicker, giving him the green light to run a little bit more. He just looks like a more confident player the last couple of weeks. So good news for Bears fans. Silver lining here, even though you lost and you're 4-7 now. Caleb looks like he's back on track. All right. The wildest game. I think that's fair to say, right? The wildest game of week 12. Cowboys Commanders had a little bit of everything, and depending on your perspective, some bad or good special teams play. And this was like the game that didn't want to die, Like, it's just the fact that, all right, I don't even know where to start here. I mean, there was like the fact that the Cowboys missed 2 field goals in the first quarter, one blocked, one they hit an upright.
Yeah.
Then they come back and Turpin has, the kickoff return for the touchdown. Um, but even then, like that's not even where the wild stuff started. The fact that the team that had the Hail Mary less than a month ago had even, I would argue, the degree of difficulty on that Terry McLaurin catch was way past the Hail Mary. Because you are so deep in your own territory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, is it 88 yards or was it 92?
86.
86, okay. So you're own 14. Like, there's no chance you're winning the game.
20 seconds left.
There's no you're out of timeouts, you got 20 seconds left. I don't know if I remember anything ever happening like that.
No. So I was watching different games because the way that the 1 o'clock window was ending was just insane. So I was watching all these different things and I turned the game off. I think I was watching like Kansas City and Carolina to see if the Chiefs are going to get upset by Carolina. And then I'm looking, I'm like you and everybody else, I'm sure Connor, Gilberto, like I'm sitting there and I'm trying to watch like 9 different things and I'm looking at my Twitter feed. And it's one of those things where people aren't saying what's happening. They're just emoting. They're like, oh my God. Like what? Like what game are we talking about? What's happening? And then I just saw McLaurin and I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, it's he threw a bomb 60 yards down the field and he got behind the safety. Like it's a Raheem or Jacoby Jones thing. And he ran in. Then I see the play. The part of that was the most stunning to me, nobody touched him.
I know.
There wasn't one Cowboy that got a hand on him. He just ran up the field untouched, and then they missed the extra point. And this is...
And then
right.
They recover the onside kick, and instead of just sitting on it, which ends the game, the guy runs it into the end zone and gives like the team that had the Hail Mary
another chance.
And then this McLaurin play gave them like, I mean, it wasn't much life, but gave them just a little bit of life.
Yeah. Did you have any thought when they scored on that touchdown, McLaurin? It was 14 seconds left. Did you have any thought they'd go for 2 and try to win it right there?
I mean, like the only reason why I'm not like a big like go for 2 every time guy.
Neither am I.
The only reason why would be because of all of the funky stuff. Did he miss an extra point earlier in the game? I'm trying to remember. This is all juggled. I think he may have missed some sort of kick earlier in the game.
Yes, he was 0 for 2 on extra points. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so just because of all the funky stuff that happened special teams wise,
yeah,
maybe I would have thought about it. But I mean, you just don't think it's actually going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, I'll defend Dan Quinn on that. Like, it's like if you're Dan Quinn,
you're putting your headset down.
Well, no, if you're Dan Quinn, you know what you think? Like, we're the better team, play for overtime. Right?
Right. And you're at home.
I mean, you're going up against a Cooper Rush-led Cowboys. We're the better team, play for overtime. I don't really have a problem with kicking the extra point because at that point, it's like, okay, somehow we just freaking pulled this off. Like, we're good now. And they're going to be defeated. And then you miss the extra point.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with them doing it either. But there was a part of me that was like, man, the Cowboys are reeling so badly right now. Just finish them. Go for it. You have Daniels. He's athletic. Get him on the edge. You can you do a little RPO, whatever you need to do. That being said, I agree with you. I don't have an issue with it. They've got to hit an extra point. I mean, that's basic football. So, that game, Cooper Rush went out and threw for 247 and 2 touchdowns. And if you're Washington now, you went from being like, okay, look, we lost a couple games. We'll be fine. We'll get right. We'll beat Dallas, be 8-4. They got the Titans coming in this week. You better beat the Titans now, or now all of a sudden it becomes really interesting. Now the Commanders had some room in the wild card picture, and they still do. But if they lose to Tennessee on Sunday, it becomes a 5-alarm fire. So they've got to button it up. But yes, that was one of the craziest. To your point, I can't remember ever seeing any play like that. The Hail Mary
plays. The more McLaurin plays is so unique. I mean, it was just again like it's. The degree of difficulty on something like that is so freaking high. And Washington, like you've done a great job, Adam Peters, Dan Quinn.
Yep.
Give Terry McLaurin an extension right now. Like he's going into a contract here in 25. He's so important to what you do and what you're building there. He's a captain. Give him whatever he wants.
Honestly,
and you're still going to need more help at that position, but give him whatever he wants.
Last thing, the only play I can think of it reminded me of, and I know this is an old play. 1988, the Niners and the Giants at Giant Stadium. Montana hit Rice down the sideline, and like Mark Collins and I forget who the corner was, but they just slammed into each other. And I don't know if you remember the play at all, but Rice went up the sideline.
I would have been 8 years old. 8 years old.
I was like 2 months old, so I get it. Okay, but I'm a nerd, and I love NFL films.
I need to look that up then. I mean,
times.
I remember
Week
88's
2,
probably 88.
1988.
I actually like 88's probably one of the earlier seasons. I really do remember watching Bengals Niners in the Super Bowl. I remember where I was for John Taylor's catch in the back of the end zone, all of that. So I do have vivid memories that year. I'd have to look that one up though.
Yeah, it was week 2 of '88. Montana came off the bench. Oh, I'm a nerd.
Because there was as crazy as it sounds, there was the Joe Montana, Steve Young quarterback controversy there.
Yeah, the most talented controversy of all time.
Yeah,
but in any event, he hit Rice with less than a minute left. They slammed into each other and ran down the sideline to win the game at Giant Stadium. It's the only play I could think of, but I still think the McLaurin play is even harder because it was deeper in the field. You're just trying to get a shot at a Hail Mary there. You're not thinking, he's going to score. He scored.
Yeah. So, Cowboys, I mean, points for, because we haven't seen this from everybody, points for showing up and showing some pride. And showing some pride. Yeah. Because that, Monday night was ugly. The Texans didn't even play that well, still beat the Cowboys by 24.
Yeah.
And, I think staring down the barrel of, oh my God, we got to play on consecutive short weeks, going into Washington and then on Thanksgiving, it would have been a very easy spot for everybody in that team to quit, and they didn't. And credit to them for that. All right, one of my favorite stories of the week is where the Broncos are and where Bo Nix is, and how Bo Nix is sort of becoming this narrative buster. And I really, I don't know. I mean, I think that I got this developing opinion now that there is this small circle of coaches that really know what they're doing with quarterbacks, and everybody else is way behind them. And Sean Payton is in that circle. It looks like he got it right, man. And Bo, I'll give Bo credit. I think the way we all looked at him as somebody who was incredibly physically limited. He made some throws. The second touchdown throw to Courtland Sutton in this one.
Beauty.
Yeah, I mean, he's rolling right and doesn't break stride and throws it back across his body to Sutton running across the end line. Bo Nix looks like he's in control, at all times. It's really impressive for a rookie, even if that rookie did have 61 college starts and is 24 years old.
Right. Well, I think that's the thing, right? So he comes in, at least in theory, with a little bit of a higher floor because of all the experience. But he came in and early on, it didn't look good. He started. The
first month wasn't great.
No, he was terrible. I mean, he was not good in any way, shape, or form. And really, even in October, you were like, eh. But the last start of October on, those last 5 games, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 0 touchdowns and a pick against Baltimore, fine. 2-0, 4-0, 2-0. I mean, and it's not just that, because that can be cherry picking sometimes. Mm-hmm. I do a film study for us every week, and one of the things I picked out against Atlanta was he made a throw down the seam to Devon Bailey that was absurd. It was between 4 guys. He just drilled it into him for 33, 34 yards. He's playing within the structure of the offense, but he's also adding value to it by making throws that aren't necessarily plays. You just go, that's an easy throw. You should make that throw. That offense is limited. You have Courtland Sutton and not a whole lot.
That was the next point I was going to make. That's what makes it more impressive what he's doing. Yeah. We talked about what Sam Darnold has around him. Bo Nix does not have around him in Denver what Sam Darnold has in Minnesota.
No. And yet they're winning. They're 7-5. This was a year I don't think anybody thought they were going to really make the playoffs, except for shout out to Peter Schrager, who had them making the playoffs when he made his picks. He was, I think, it. The only person I saw picking them. I sure as hell wasn't. Look, here's the thing with Denver moving forward, okay? They're 7-5. They have games remaining against Indianapolis and Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. Those are the games. Like, those are the games. If they win those games, they're going to go to the playoffs. They're going to get in. Now, they don't have to necessarily win them. They've got Cleveland on a Monday night this week. It's a game they should win at home. They've got Kansas City in Week 18, which sounds daunting, but who knows? Who knows who needs that game? You know, the Chiefs might be playing for nothing. They're not going to be playing to go undefeated.
Might be playing Carson Wentz.
Yeah, right. It might be the Carson Wentz, Carson Steele show. Like, it might be nothing. And here's the ironic thing, though. It could be the other way, too. The Broncos could be locked into a wild card spot and be playing for nothing. Take it as a bye week.
And the Chiefs could be playing for the 1 seed. Yeah.
So who knows who's going to need that game? Point is, in 2 weeks, they play at home against Indianapolis. To me, that's the game. If they win that game, I think they go to the playoffs.
Yeah, and they just 2 quick stories to wrap up on Denver. Number one, I think the things are starting to turn just long term in Denver too. Sean Payton told me over the summer that he really thought the class he has here, the rookie class he has, which is Bo, but it's also Audric Estime and Devon Vele and Troy Franklin and there's a lot of good players in that class that are already contributing. He compared it to his 06 and 17 classes in New Orleans. And for those who don't know, I'll use the 17 class as the example because it's more recent, but that class had Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, Alvin Kamara, Trey Hendrickson, Alex Anzalone, Marcus Williams. I mean, guys who guys 8 years later who were all still in the NFL, right? And all still good players. And so I think there's a foundation of something now to really build off of going forward there. The second thing, I did talk to Bo Nix on the phone last night, and I thought what was interesting was that second touchdown I brought up, right? This will go to your point about structure. I had it in my head that it was a scramble play, and it wasn't. It wasn't. It was, and I went back and looked at it, and he was right. It was like a moving pocket, and it looked like the pressure was coming. But he, despite the pocket moving, despite things happening fast, it was slow enough in his head that he was still processing everything and throwing to his second read, which it didn't look like he could even see him, right? It was kind of behind him a little bit. So I think it was just a good example of just a kid who has seen a lot, who's been through a lot, through 61 college starts, 2 schools, 2 conferences, all the different defenses he's seen, all the different trials and tribulations he's been through. A kid who really keeps his head about him because of everything he's gone through. It's the value. Same way Jaden Daniels had this value. It's the value of just being a high volume college player.
Yeah.
And so I really like where Bo Nix is now. As for the Raiders, we can talk
about the Raiders.
I mean, I would just say this. Looking at that division right now, do you stay the course with what you've got right now?
Long climb.
I mean, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the Chiefs, obviously at the top. But then after that, Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers, who are looking like a Jim Harbaugh team now. And then what's happening in Denver? Do you think, if you're Mark Davis, Tom Telesco, that Antonio Pierce is going to be the guy that's going to get you in position to compete at that level? I don't know. I think there are big picture questions to ask after the year in Vegas, and I think they will ask those questions.
Albert, I got to be honest with you. I didn't think it's a question.
Yeah.
I mean, is it really a question? Not to be overly blunt about it, although I guess that's kind of who I am. I feel like they've got to move on. They've got look. There is no world when you're firing guys you hired before you've had 10 games in the seat.
Yeah.
It's over. You can't. He fired basically his whole offensive staff that he brought in. It wasn't like he inherited these guys from McDaniels. He brought those guys in. Now Minshew's done for the year, right? So now it's going to be Aiden O'Connell and it's going to be Desmond Ridder. I think if you're the Raiders, I know it's painful if you're a Raiders fan because you've been going through this for 20 years. I get it. The best thing that could happen to this team, quite frankly, right now is they just lose. And they get a high pick and they go and they get their Cam Ward or their Shador Sanders. I'm sure Sanders, that's going to be a story unto itself this entire offseason, where he goes and everything else. But you need a quarterback and you need a coach in that division or you're screwed. You're just, to your point, let's face it, in the next 10 years, assuming Mahomes is healthy, you're going to have to win what to win that division? 13 games?
Yeah.
Like, you're not having a 9-8 year. This is not going to be the NFC West. Like, you're going to have to win a lot of games.
All three teams have their coach. All three teams have their quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, you're just playing way, way, way from behind right now.
Yep. All right. Our last one before we get into the lightning round, Titans-Texans. This was a wildly entertaining game. Probably not one a lot of people had circled. Really quick on Tennessee. Like, I think Brian Callahan is showing his chops for developing a quarterback right now. And whether or not Will Levis becomes the guy long term, I think the progress we're seeing from Levis is proof positive that a guy who worked with Matthew Stafford, Peyton Manning, Derek Carr, Joe Burrow over the course of his career really knows what he's doing at that position. Levis is playing so much better than he was two months ago. And I think Callie and his staff deserve a lot of credit for that. I'd feel pretty good if I was a Titans fan right now about where this thing's going. They've got a long ways to go from a roster standpoint, but I think we're starting to see a lot of progress there. As for Houston, what are they, 7-5 now? Is that right?
Yeah.
Or 7-5?
Yep, 7-5.
Okay, so they're going to probably win that division.
Yeah,
I don't. The defense got ripped open last night, and CJ does not look the same as he did last year. And I remember talking to people in Minnesota about what Brian Flores did to them early in the year, right? And I remember one person there making the comment to me, like, I really hope that this shows them how they have to evolve their offense and how they have to keep searching for answers. I wouldn't be shocked if there are changes on the offensive staff after the year next year with some of the frustration or after the year this year, if there are with some of the frustrations that are going on there. And I'll be interested to see if whether or not they do wind up winning the division, which again, they should win that division. Like, yeah. I really like Shane Steichen and what he's building in Indianapolis through all of the issues they've had at quarterback. But I don't think the Colts have the bullets in the gun right now to make it to the finish line and pass the Texans. Even if the Texans wind up winning that division, they've got this commodity in the quarterback, who they'll still think has got a chance to be an absolute superstar. I think his ceiling is to be a top 5 quarterback in the league. And, he's just struggling with certain things right now, and the offense is having trouble getting on track. The offensive line, which they invested a lot in, is having its issues now. That, to be fair, they have had some injuries there, but the offensive line has, I think it's fair to say now, underperformed. Yeah. The Collins injury affected them for sure, but it just feels like there's way more juice that they're not squeezing out of the potential of that group.
Yeah. Look, I mean, this is a game where Will Levis was sacked 8 times. Yeah. He threw a pick 6. The Titans had 3 turnovers in that game. They were terrible on third down. They only got in the red zone once, and they won on the road despite all of that. I mean, that is impossible if you're Houston to lose that football game. And yet here you are, and look, it's a weird thing to say about a team. We're not even to Thanksgiving. They're basically the 4 seed right now in the AFC. Like, I don't know. They're not going to climb, and I don't think that, obviously they can't fall as long as they win the division. Stroud in the last 6 weeks, and I'm not saying
which means you're probably going to get like Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers.
Them or whoever loses the AFC North.
Or Baltimore, yeah.
Right,
yeah,
or Pittsburgh, right? One of those 3 teams.
Baltimore or Pittsburgh, right.
I'll tell you what, you better fix your offensive line problems before you play any of those 3 teams.
Yeah.
Because they will
eat you alive.
Absolutely butcher ball you at the point of attack. Yeah. So the problem I have with the Texans long term is exactly that. They can't block. I mean, if you watch these games, Stroud has not played well. He would be the first one to tell you that. He was sacked 4 times again yesterday.
Yeah.
They can't protect. And he's not mobile. That's one thing about Stroud. He's not, he's not Lamar Jackson back there. He's not Josh Allen back there.
He can move, but he's not.
I mean, he's gonna get hit if you give up pressure. And so, look, the bottom line is that team has talent. That is a talented defensive team. They have the best edge rush combination, I'd argue, in football right now. Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter. I believe in Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator there. But at some point, you can't lose to the Jets. You can't lose, and I don't care that they're injured. I don't care. You're talented enough to win these games. You should be beating the Titans at home. You know, and that right now, you'll look at the Texans and go, is this just one of those years they kind of got to learn and grow through it? Or can they get right on the back half? And I think right now, you know, as they go forward 7-5, and they've got Jacksonville next. Like, that's a game you've got to get right. You've got to win that game going away. If you don't, that portends big problems with Miami, Kansas City, and Baltimore the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I'd even be a little worried if that game was close, to be honest, man.
That's right. You got to win by double digits. Like, you've got to pull away in that game.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I think the Texans' future is incredibly bright. Nick Caserio has done a great job putting that roster together. D'Amico Ryans is without question the right head coach. Just there's something about the mix this year, and who knows? Maybe it has something to do with last year making them a little comfortable and listening to what people are saying about you to some degree, you know, but one way or the other, the mix isn't quite the same. We'll jump into the lightning round now. You guys know how this goes. We're going to bump through the remaining 5 games in rapid fire fashion. We'll start with the Lions and the Colts. My big takeaway from this, Matt, the Lions defense is now playing at the level of the Lions offense, and they're doing it without Aiden Hutchinson, which is wild. And it's like everything they do works. Okay, Aiden Hutchinson's gone. We'll trade for Zadarius Smith. DJ Reader comes back off of injury. Boom. You know, we're better than they were. Like, statistically, they are better than they were with Aiden Hutchinson this year, which is wild because Aiden Hutchinson was their best player on that side of the ball. You know, was it 10 quarters without a touchdown allowed? They're a machine right now. And this wasn't even like a peak game for them. It's just, you know, it almost feels like they've got so many different ways to beat you that, well, if this one thing isn't working, well, we'll beat you these 3 other ways.
Right now, they're the best team in football. No, I don't know how you'd argue it now.
And I was hesitant to say that before the Chiefs lost out of respect to a 2-time defending champion that was undefeated. Right. But, like, I felt that way even before the Chiefs lost. You know what I mean? Like,
because the Chiefs are like the polar opposite of them, which we'll get to in a minute, where the Chiefs just, I don't know whether it's like apathy or what it is with the Chiefs, but it's like, yeah, we'll win at the last play. Detroit is rolling people. And, you know, to your point, I mean, this game against Indianapolis, they didn't even really take the car out for a drive in this game. It was like, okay, Goff's going to throw for 269. He's not going to really do that much. Gibbs, 90 yards rushing. You know, nobody had over 65 yards receiving, but it didn't matter because you had Richardson going 11 for 28. So you didn't have to do anything. I mean, the only team I think that can challenge them in the NFC is Philly, with the caveat being if Love gets right, the Packers have enough that you'd look at it and go, maybe they go up there and beat them. But I think Philadelphia right now is the only team in the NFC that I look at and say, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if they went to Detroit and won the game. Like,
I think it's going to be really, I also think like home field's going to be a factor. Like, I think that place, like, I think going into that place is going to be really difficult for anyone. And I would love to see an Eagles Lions NFC title game in the Dome. Packers Lions too. You know,
you know how emotional that place should be with them playing the Packers to go to the Super Bowl.
Oh,
after all the years we've gotten beat up by that. And by the way,
and how close they were last year and the lead they had in the NFC title game. And it's hard to believe. I dug this up yesterday just because I was interested. This is the first time in franchise history. The Lions have been around for 95 years. This is the first time in franchise history they've had double-digit wins in back-to-back seasons. And they did it winning 12 games last year, so it's not like it was close last year, getting 10 wins. And this year was 6 games to go. It's insane.
It's incredible. I wonder, like, do we feel like we know? And of course, this is kind of dumb, but it's. I feel like we almost know what the conference title games are going to be. Like, it feels like that. I mean, maybe that's not true.
Chiefs, Bills, and Lions, Eagles.
It feels like it's just we're going to wake up on the 3rd weekend of January and be like, okay, this is what it's all been building towards. You know, like Allen and Mahomes, 97 at this point, and Philly and Detroit. I mean, look, could Baltimore crash the party? Could Green Bay crash? Maybe. But it feels like those 4 teams are the clear-cut best 4 teams in the league.
All right, Giants, Bucks. Bucks had lost 4 in a row. They bounced back coming off their bye week. They are right back in it. The Falcons have stumbled a bit. The Bucks are only a game back. The Bucks do have the disadvantage of having been swept. So this is really kind of a 1.5 game deficit, not a 1 game deficit. But they've got time to make that up now. Still think they're a really good team. They bludgeoned the Giants, and So I think this makes Thursday an inflection point for the Giants, where the Maras have no designs on moving on from Brian Daboll or Joe Shane, but they felt the same way about Joe Judge in 21, and then that season ended the way that it ended. So like I don't know if they need to go into Dallas and win on Thursday, but I don't think they can look like that again. Like that was about as ugly as it gets.
They've not won a game at home this year. They're 0-6 at home, which, by the way, neither is Dallas. So it's just a battle of teams you can't win. I guess you're probably happier on the road if you're the Giants in this game. There's nothing to hang your hat on right now if you're the Giants. I mean, is it just a pass rush? Maybe it's that. You know, you sit there and go, okay, we've got...
And some of the stuff in the locker room was really bad. Did you hear any of it?
Yeah, with Neighbors and...
Neighbors and Dexter Lawrence said we're soft, and, you know,
I think
Illuminor said something along the lines of, like that he thought everybody wasn't giving 100%. It's like really bad stuff coming out of that locker room.
When you start saying stuff like that to me, the coach is done. Like that's my... Now you look... do you feel like they will move off Daboll after this year?
I think John Mara absolutely does not want to do it. And I think the reason why is he's afraid of becoming the Jets. Like, he doesn't want to be the team that's changing philosophies every 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't want to be that. And that was the reasoning for wanting to give Judge a third year. Was like, I like the guy. He made good progress in year 1. We hit a bump in year 2. I do think there's like a foundation and piece. That's the thing about it, Matt. Like, I think, you know, between Andrew Thomas at left tackle, who's hurt and not playing right now and is out for the year, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, who might be the defensive player of the year despite how bad that team is, Brian Burns, Malik Neighbors. You've got really good players at premium positions that I think can be the foundation for either Shane and Daboll or someone else going forward. I think you're right though. Like, when it becomes an effort issue, like that's when bigger picture questions get asked. And so like that's why I think coming out of this is going to be really important. Patriots Dolphins, you know, my biggest takeaway from this is I'm sorry, Tua Tagovailoa, you're better and more valuable than I ever thought you were. The way they built that defense around that offense in Miami, Mike McDaniel did, around timing and accuracy and anticipation of the quarterback, because that's what Tua is really good at. And seeing the way it dropped off when you pulled him out of there, they look like the team they've been the last couple of years now. You know, they lost a couple of tough ones to Arizona and Buffalo, good teams. And now they're right back on their feet, and you know, they're 5-6, and you can't rule them out. Like, I think, you know, this is a Dolphins team that's getting more comfortable playing in Anthony Weaver's defense. And then the offense is humming again with Tua, and Waddle played great yesterday. Yeah, I think they've got a shot to get in, Matt. I think they've got a shot to get in.
They do. Here's my thing with the Dolphins, and I'm not trying to be cold water guy, but I'm just trying to keep it real. They play on Thursday night, on Thanksgiving night. They're in Green Bay.
At Green Bay.
It's 17 degrees that night, at least the forecast.
This is another referendum game. Is where you
can you win that game, please? Like, can I see you win one game against a good team when it's not 80? Like, can you go out and win this game? Because if they go to Green Bay and they score 13 points and Tua's throwing for $150, like, I don't want to hear about the Dolphins. And they've got cold weather games coming up. They've got to play at the Jets. They've got to play with the Browns. And that's a night game in Cleveland, by the way. Like, everything you said is right. But I also, I remember watching them in the wild card game last year and thinking there is no way this team wants to be here. Like, I don't blame them for losing. They were beat up. It is what it is. But, just the body language, you're like, this game's over. They're not winning this game. Like, I want to see a different body language in this game. Go into this game, play well offensively, show me that you're not just speed merchants who have no ability to play in anything below 65 degrees. Like, go do something that shows me you're not the same old thing. Don't wear a t-shirt telling me that you love how cold it is. Like, go out and play football that shows me you love how cold it is. That is my concern for them. If they win this game on Thanksgiving night, color me very impressed, color me in.
Unrelated, I can't wait to see Tennessee or Georgia or freaking Texas or A&M or whoever else have to go to South Bend or Columbus or State College or Eugene next month. All right, Chiefs Panthers. That's my own personal thing. You guys
I was going to say, I feel like that was for you. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was for me. So Chiefs Panthers. Just off the top, like I like Dave Canales. Credit to you. Your team looked dead in the water, and like you've pulled them out of the ditch, and like it looks like you pressed the right buttons with Bryce Young. I do think to some degree like there's an accountability play there where Bryce like knew like, hey, I'm not on scholarship anymore here. Like I have to if I'm going to keep my job, I got to perform. They're getting a higher level of play out of him. They play their ass off every week. They came back in this one full marks to Dave Canales and the Panthers for the way they're playing right now. So the Chiefs are interesting. I sort of feel like they're in that Patriot territory. You know, like that 33-yard run was impressive, of course, right? Like at the spot it's in for Mahomes to make that run. There's also like a little bit of a subtext of him having to do it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like that he has to do that because like I know he only pulls that lever when he has to. And like I think that was all right, we got to have this now. So I still don't think they know exactly who they're going to be offensively. They're still figuring that out. They've obviously got top of the league coaches on that side of the ball to figure it out. But you know, clearly I don't think we have a full idea of who they're going to be 6 or 7 weeks from now when they go into the playoffs.
Well, so there's a few things at play here. They're getting Pacheco back.
Yeah.
On defense, they're getting Amenahu back. They're probably getting Hollywood Brown back. I think, you know, you talk to excuse me, you talk to a handful of people. I know I've talked to some people. The thought is that he's going to be back late in the year, that there's at least a very good possibility he's back late in the year. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. The point, though, right now is what do you believe with the Chiefs? I mean, is it that, look, this is what they are, and they're just barely beating these teams that on paper they should be crushing? Or is it, you know, look, I know this is a taboo thing in football and in sports, but I think it's also just true. It is human nature. Like, they've won 2 Super Bowls in a row, and I don't know how much they can get up for a game in the middle of November every week.
Yeah.
Every week, you're somebody's Super Bowl, and every week, you have to give your best effort to not have the game be close. I don't know how much. I know people will say, well, they're coming off a loss, and they should be fired up. Sure, fine. They're playing Carolina at 1 o'clock. Like, I don't know with them. Let's put it this way. I could see 2 outcomes. I could see them getting to the playoffs, and they get upset. And we all sit here and go, yeah, well, all the warning signs in the world were there. Or they get to the playoffs and they have the 1 seed and they play Houston in the first round, in the divisional round, and win 42-13. And we're like, well, of course they did. Like, they've been waiting for their season to start for 4 months. I don't know where I fall with them. I kind of fall toward the latter because I've just seen them do this for years. But you would like to see them at some point be a little more impressive here as time goes on.
I've seen this movie before. In New England for 20 years. You know, they have a couple things in common with the Patriots when it comes to what happened on Sunday. Number one, like those Patriots teams would have close calls. They generally wouldn't lose to bad teams. And the Chiefs really don't lose to bad teams a whole lot, right? So that's number one. Their one loss was against probably the best team in the AFC. Number two, they do have an understanding of what it's going to take to win every game. And, you know, if they need to pull those levers, they can. So, you know, in a lot of ways, I think this puts them in a position like the Patriots were in this position over and over again, which was like, we're still sort of, it may be November, but we're still sort of figuring out who we are and what the best way to win is going to be for us in January. And that's a big advantage. I'm not saying there aren't concerns. There certainly are concerns. But having the advantage of being able to be this deep into the season, knowing you're going to make the playoffs, knowing you're going to win your division,
right,
and still being able to say, okay, like we can use these games to figure out who you are, I think winds up being a massive advantage in January. And I think it's a big reason why like the Patriots won the AFC Championship game 8 years in a row, and why now the Chiefs have been in the AFC Championship game
6 years in a row.
6 years in a row, right? So like, it's like I tend to trust that they're going to be okay. So all right, our final game of the week, Cardinals Seahawks. The Seahawks knock off the Cardinals, pull into a first place tie, in the NFC West, those two are a game ahead of the 49ers and the Rams, just like everybody predicted before the year. I'm impressed with. I will say this just kind of quickly. I'm impressed with how Mike McDonald has handled a weird couple of weeks and how they cut a starting linebacker in Tyrell Dodson. They have their starting center, Connor Williams, retire.
Yeah.
And just a weird couple of weeks, they win 2 games. And I just think it's a good sign for where they are as a program. Geno, again, I think remains one of the more underrated players in all of football. Jackson Smith-Njigba is emerging as a real star there, and they've got really good balance on offense. It's not a team without flaws, but they win this slugfest, and
right.
I just think that there are a lot of good signs of as far as where Mike McDonald's taking Seattle from here.
Well, I give Seattle a lot of credit. I looked at this game before the game was played and thought Arizona's going to run the ball all over them because Seattle struggled against the run. Yeah. And Arizona's number 2 in the league in yards per carry. And I figured, okay, it's going to be a James Conner game. It's going to be Kyler Murray making some plays with his legs. They ran for 3.5 yards a carry. They did nothing. They had 49 total rushing yards. I think you're starting to see with McDonald, like the last couple of weeks, that defense is starting to turn that corner, right? And we all thought, like, at some point, he's going to get that defense where he wants to get it to. Well, they went into San Francisco. They shut the Niners down. They won late. They win this game against Arizona. And the defense, by the way, scores a touchdown. I thought it was the pivotal play of the game. They get the pick six by Kobe Bryant, runs it back 69 yards for a touchdown, kind of blows the game open. If Seattle can get that defense to where I think it can go, they become an interesting team in the playoffs because, to your point, Smith-Njigba the last month is really taken off. They've got Metcalf. They've got a star who's a veteran guy, but they've got Lockett. They've got that 1-2 punch in the backfield. Like all of a sudden, you look at Seattle and go, okay, that's a team that's a little more interesting maybe than people thought even a month back.
And a lot of players who are ascending, like a lot of young players who are ascending, both on offense and defense. That'll do it for us for Week 12. Matt, thanks for coming out. I'm not saying that you Wally pipped Connor, but I'm also not ruling it out.
Let's not be hasty.
On a personal note, I am wearing my gear because it is that week. Go Bucks! Michigan sucks. Matt, tell people where they can find you later in the week.
Yeah, just at my ridiculous name, at Matt Verderame on Twitter. You can find me there. Good luck spelling it. Other than that, si.com where I share the pages with Albert and Connor and Gilberto. And then look, hey, listen. More importantly, this week, everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the football. If the turkey doesn't put you to bed, the Cowboys and Giants are going to do it. Don't worry about it. They've got you covered. So,
absolutely.
I hope
actually it sets up kind of nice this year because like that window where the game you don't want to watch quite as much is right when you
wake up for Dolphins Packers. You're like, oh, good. I'm well rested for this game.
Yep. So we got 3 games on Thursday. We got 1 game on Friday. We got revenge on Saturday, and then a full slate on Sunday. Appreciate you guys coming out. Enjoy Week 13, everybody. We'll see you guys next week.